So today's lesson is going to be on the table saw. We happen to have two of them in this school. One here, which is called a saw stop table saw, and then one over here, which is the Delta table saw. Now the saw stop is a wonderful machine for beginner woodworkers because it has a mechanism on the blade that breaks the blade if your finger touches the blade. Now it's not a guarantee, but that's what's supposed to happen so you don't get severely injured by the machine. The second saw over here is our Delta, and it's been around here for quite a while, but it's definitely an excellent table saw because it has an extension on it. Plus we've lowered the secondary table, the work table that's behind it or in front of it, so that we can cut large sheets of plywood. It also has a unifence, which gives us some options for some different cutting methods and techniques. Whereas this table saw doesn't have the extension table, so what I've done is I've put an outfeed roller to help support the wood on longer pieces. And we can put multiple outfeed rollers as well, but for this I should only need one. If you don't have someone to help you as a receiver, then you'll need to have that outfeed roller. Now, if there's one piece of stationary equipment I would say and recommend to buy, it would be the table saw. A close second would probably be a bandsaw, but the table saw is a very versatile machine. You can use it for ripping, you can use it for cross-cutting, you can set it up to make cove moldings on it, you can do a lot of different things. You can cut angles, even circles if you really needed to, which is a little bit more difficult, but you can do a lot of different things. You can make jigs to help you do those specialty items and techniques that you're building. So definitely a good piece of equipment to have in your shop, especially if you want to get into the higher end woodworking pieces, like furniture, for example. So the table saw is very versatile, but it's also quite dangerous. It has two types of dangers, just like the crosscut sliding miter saw. We can cut your fingers or yourself with the tool, but it also has board kickback. So instead of the machine coming back at you, like the sliding miter saw, it has material kickback. And material kickback can happen straight back, or it can happen sideways. So if we have a larger piece of wood and it goes and torques away from the fence, it can catch and go sideways on us. And there's different things that we can do to prevent that from happening. For one example, we have a riving knife on here. This riving knife helps prevent that sideways kickback. It also keeps that saw curve open so that it doesn't collapse in on the blade and then come back at you. So to prevent kickback, we want to make sure that we're setting the machine up properly and setting your body position properly as well. And that will also help prevent you from being cut by the machine. Ultimately, you want not only a good stance, and I'll go through that right away on where you should stand when you're using the machine, but you should make sure that you are safe. Short sleeves, no jewelry on, anything long especially, long hair should be tied back, everything nice, neat, and tidy. Kind of like what you see here, safety glasses, so that you aren't going to be pulled into the machine and cut by the machine, or you're not going to snag on something. So keep it nice, neat, and tidy, and you should be good to go. Kickback can happen straight back or sideways, like I was saying. We've purposely placed the table saws at the back of the shop for that reason. If people are behind you, first of all, you should be considerate and ask them to move in case kickback happens. But as another person in the class, you should also realize that the table saw is being used and you shouldn't walk behind the people using kickback. I've heard many stories of kickback happening and seen some videos of it happening. You can probably, I'm sure, search it up. And I've seen a 2x2 go through a cinder block wall on video when I was going to school. And I've also seen one stick into a door, something like that, if you can see that back there. So kickback happens fast, and it's it can be lethal. So we want to make sure we're positioning our body correctly and using the proper devices. A couple more devices that we have are the push sticks, and you're going to be required to use these push sticks, and I'll explain that as well soon enough. So let's set up the machine. The first thing we want to do is we want to adjust your height adjustment crank. Now your height adjustment crank is on the front of the machine. You loosen the center lock screw, and then you can turn this up or down. Now we want to set it so that it's about a pencil width above the stock, or 3 full blades. If it's too low, what happens is that there's a chance that the board can ride on top of the blade and it can come back at you. And if it's too high, if you slip, you're going to maybe cut a little bit more off than if it was lower down. So we don't want it too high, we don't want it too low. About 3 full teeth above the stock. Now once you have that set up, we can go ahead and set up the rip fence. The rip fence is easy to operate. We just lift up the red handle and then we can move it right or left. The unisaw or unifence rip fence is a little bit more difficult. So when we get to that tool as a intermediate and advanced woodworker, you're going to learn a different style of tightening and securing that fence. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut off the opposite edge to the edge that we jointed on the edge jointer. We'll place that in line with the blade and just pull this fence over and lock it down. So approximately the thickness of the blade. And we always want to check that fence, because if it didn't lock down and you start cutting, it can be extremely dangerous, because you never cut freehand on this. You always use either a fence setup or a miter gauge like that. After you set that up, you're going to flip it end for end to make sure that it's cutting all the way through. And this one is a little bit tapered, this board. I am cutting a little bit on this end, but it'll be enough. I just want to slice off that end to make a nice, smooth and straight cut. Now, before you are using this machine, you're going to be practicing with me as a receiver. You are not allowed to come on after this lesson and just come and use the machine. I'm going to be receiving for you. I will take that outfeed roller away and I'll be the receiver. And the receiver has an important job. The receiver only pushes towards the fence and never pulls the board. Okay, so just pushing tight against the fence. We want to make sure that this board stays against this fence at all time. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we start before the blade and end after the blade. Now you'd think that's common sense, but common sense doesn't grow in everybody's orchard. So what I'm going to do is draw a line right here and right here. So the first line I'm going to draw is where your board should start. So I'll just put board start. And the second line is where your board should be pushed to. Okay, so right there. And I'll put board end. So I'll just lower the blade to show you how this looks with the machine off. The board is going to start at this line, and it's going to push past that second line onto your outfeed roller, and then up and over with the push stick. We'll talk about the push sticks here in a minute. So now that I have my board start and my board end line drawn, I can go ahead and show you how to use these push sticks to correspond with those lines. Now, the board that we're using has that jointed edge that goes always towards the fence. That's why we jointed it. This first push stick is going to be used to hold this in place, and it's going to be fairly near that board start line, maybe a little bit back. If it's a short enough board, we can start pushing right with the push stick like so. This one's short enough to do that. These other ones are going to have to use a little bit different technique. Now we're going to hold that in place, and this push stick is going to be pushing in towards this point here. Now we're not going to push this way, and we're not going to push straight down. We're going to split those in half, and we're going to push in this direction. Okay? The back push stick splits the difference between the blade and the fence. So it's going to be halfway between the blade and the fence. So it'll line up right there. Now I'm standing beside the board because kickback generally will happen, if it happens, straight back. So we don't want to be in the line of fire. We want to be beside it. So my stance is close to the machine. I don't want to be too far away because I'll be leaning over top of the machine. I actually want to, just like the miter saw, have that base of support. Even my left leg can lean against the machine a bit, as long as you don't shut the switch off. It's very easy to shut off on this machine. And it's going to work something like this. We're going to be pushing the board through. The left push stick will slide at that blue line, pushing at the same time towards the fence and table. And then this back push stick is going to slide or push the board past that second blue line. When I'm at this point, I just take and go up and over with my push stick. Please don't drag your push stick back because it can catch the blade and you don't want to cut your fingers off. So push it past, up and over. You don't want to push it so far past that you're leaning over the blade. That's why the line is here and not way up here. But you have to clear the blade, because if you stop when the blade is moving where the blade is, it can vibrate back and forth, kick back. We don't want that. Now sideways kickback happens when the board comes away from the fence, and that's what this prevents. It prevents it from going sideways, and it keeps it down. So if this comes away from the fence like so, so if let's say it comes away from the fence like that, it can grab that blade on the side, and then it will pivot back here and then come this way like so, and then it'll head in that direction. Okay? Now, I kind of did a little bit of a no-no. I don't know if you picked that up. When we're pushing this through, up and over. If you have a receiver, that receiver should give you the board back around the blade. So around one side or the other. If you have a pattern, let's say you're picking from this side and putting on this spot side, it doesn't matter as long as you have a pattern. You shouldn't reach over the blade though to take it, and that's the no-no. So I went like this. Not a good idea, because now I'm right over that blade. If anything, you can come around and you can get your piece. Okay? You don't want it to lean over the blade because you don't want to fall on the blade, but also you don't want to pick this up and then drop it on the blade, because then it'll come back at you. Okay? So always around the blade, please. Okay, so I'll show you that one more time. Stance beside the board, close to the machine. We're just a little bit back from that board start. This is halfway between the board and the fence. Pushing that through and past that blue line, up and over. This push stick doesn't go past the board start line, because then you're pushing against the blade and you're causing the blade to bind, which is another bad thing, because if you're binding the blade, you're pushing the blade against the board, against the fence, causes kickback. You're closing up that saw curve that you've just created. So you don't want to do that either. So these lines are very important. Again, if you become an advanced woodworker, you won't have these lines, but you know you need to start before the blade and end after the blade. So I think we're ready to do a little sample cut. We'll raise the blade with this front crank 3 teeth above the fence, or a pencil width, just a regular pencil. Don't worry about this side crank here. This is for the angle, and we're not going to be worrying about the angle in this lesson. Now that that's begun, I'm going to turn on the vents for this because this shoots a lot of dust in your eyes. So I'd really highly recommend turning on the vents because it's actually a safety issue with this one. Now to start the machine, we pull the paddle towards you. Let the blade get up to speed, and then we can begin. Right past the blue, up and over, shut it off. Again, the vents will be running all class. You don't have to worry about them. I'm just shutting them off so that you can hear me. Now this is perfect. See this little piece of wood that came off? Wait for the blade to stop, shut off the machine, then take it out. I see a lot of people trying to get it out while the machine is running. You're probably pretty quick, but you're not that quick. So this little piece is just garbage or kindling or whatever we're going to do with that. And now we have a nicely ripped edge. So we go around the machine and grab that. Now this edge is nice. You can look down, make sure you're not over the blade, look down it. Very nice. You can check it against something straight, like this fence, or sorry, like this table. Yes, very nice. It doesn't rock. That would be considered a finished edge. But this other edge is not finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that finished edge towards the fence and take off another, maybe just half of a blade. I'm trying to keep these boards fairly wide for now, and I can cut the other side. Now the reason I'm going to cut the other side is because I have a little bit of imperfection and I want to take my cuts from this side, A2 and A1, which are marked here and here. Okay, so I'm just going to put that there and I'm going to do another cut. And right now we are at a little bit more than 6.5 inches. So I'm hoping this will work out well. I gotta turn the vents back on. Okay, so that's now your ripped edge. That goes towards the fence. So the general rule of thumb is you have to use push sticks whenever you can use push sticks. They keep your hands away from the blade. If anything, we can cut the push sticks, and we in some instances do cut the push sticks on purpose. Very thin strips if you're cutting. But the general rule of thumb is if your hand in an open position can't fit in between the blade and the fence, then you should be using push sticks. So your hand in this position, no, that's still not enough. So your board would have to be about this wide, and then we would maybe allow you to use just your hand to push it through. A hand is nice because you've got, I guess, more control than this, but after you become used to these, you're going to have a lot of control with these as well. So this board has 2 ripped edges, and they look super fine, super fine. So this board's done. I'm just going to put it on this side, and I'm going to continue doing the same with these boards. I'm going to skip to the long board to show you a different technique here. This ripped edge, again, or sorry, jointed edge goes towards the fence, and I will cut off about a blade's width, flip end for end, and we're going to cut both ends, so that's going to work really well. This is where the difference comes in on this one. If I go way back here, I've got all this board hanging off the edge. That's going to want to really fall on me. So what I'm going to do is get you to hold your hand inside the push stick like so. And you're going to use the palm of your hand, and that is going to push through. And you're going to have this ready to go. Generally, you don't want to stop when you're using the machine. This is the one case you can stop, just to switch. Now it's going to look like this. I'll lower this first of all to show you. it's going to look like this. So this same position, push through, slides at the blue. Once you get to the table, you hold tight with your left hand, your right one comes up, and then you continue pushing through, right to that blue line, up and over. Okay? So let's see what that looked like with the blade running. There's a pencil, so I'll show you how high it is. Of course, the vents. God, that vent button is so close. Now you notice there were some pieces coming back, these little pieces like this coming back on the left side. Kickback occurs between the blade and the fence. That's the part that can jam and kick back at you. Anything out here will just flutter around. It's not jamming in between each anything, so it can't come back at you unless you push against the blade. You can kind of think about it as like those automatic tennis ball throwers or baseball throwers where you drop the ball in and it goes and it takes two wheels and it goes through. That's exactly the same thing as this. It can grab, bind, come back at you. On this side there's nothing else running here, so nothing will come back at you. Okay, so you've seen a shorter board and a long board. Now the next step, I'll do some cuts here, I'll finish those up. The next step is to take and to rip these to the finished dimensions that we need. So let's get those dimensions and go at her. Okay, I have ripped all of the edges of the boards, and I did choose to rip both edges just so that I could have a choice on which edge I wanted to put towards the fence. For example, this one here has some imperfections right here, and I want to cut that off if I can. These boards, A's and C's, get cut to final width of 3 inches, and D's and D and B are 5.5 inches. So let's start with A's. We can set this to 3 inches. There's a little indicator right here to show where to go. 3 inches. Lock it down, check the fence, double check with a tape measure. Make sure it is correct. Sometimes this gets knocked out of adjustment, or you might have set it up looking at a different line. So always double check your measurement. Now that that's set up, I want to reiterate the placement of your push sticks. Now the back push stick is halfway between the blade and the fence. So the blade and the fence is here. So this push stick needs to be halfway in between here. It's pushing through here. This is the board that needs to get pushed through all the way, and this one's going to stop at the blue. Well, it's going to stop as soon as this gets cut off. This one will stop at the one on the right will be the one that gets pushed to the blue line. The one on the left, I don't have to worry about kickback, remember, because it's not binding between anything else unless I'm pushing against the fence or against the blade. But you're not, because this push stick ended right here. Okay? Get those. I'll get the vents back on, and I believe we're good to go. I'm going to do 2 cuts per board and try to get rid of most of that. And I've got the same issue over there as well. Okay, so machine on. Oh, so sometimes if you accidentally don't turn it on properly, you got to shut it off, let the computer think, and then start again. I just kind of knocked it, it didn't start properly. So let's try that again. There we go. Again, halfway between the blade and the fence. blue line, up and over. Let the blade stop, and then you can go and collect your boards. This one's done, so I can just put it over here, and then I can cut this one. Now if you have someone receiving for you, you don't have to shut the machine off every time. They can put the board here, and then give the other board around the blade. So it looks something like that. And up and over. Exact same thing for C's, except that this is a longer board, so I'm going to use that other technique where I'm holding my push stick in my hand and pushing with the palm of my hand. The blue. I can turn that off with my leg as well, so that you're focused on what you're doing. Come back. Nice sticks like this, we save them and use them for stir sticks. For now, we'll just put it over here. So my 3-inch A's and C's. I've already cut this to 5.5 inches. Actually, you can use the board itself to measure your next board if it has to be even, as long as you do that. That through. Yep, that's perfect. And I double check, we're 5.5 inches. I put that joint, or actually that ripped edge towards the fence. And I have 2 ripped edges, so I can pick which ripped edge I want towards the fence. That's the way I'm going to do it. And our last cut. Board, but I'm still going to use this technique. Up and over. Again, let that blade stop before you grab these pieces out of here. There you have it, all of the maple pieces that I needed to rip. I'm going to go ahead off film and I'm going to rip the 1/4-inch strips of walnut. Actually, maybe you should see how that works too. Let me get that and show you that setup as well. Well, look what I found. Some beautiful pieces of walnut. So if you can see that there, it's a lot darker colored wood, and it's going to really look nice in between my curly maple pieces. Now, I've done everything I did with these boards. I took them over to this compound sliding miter saw. I cut them to rough length, 30.5, 37.5, and then I went to my edge jointer and jointed one edge, and then I came over here and then ripped the opposite edge to get a nice smooth edge, which I'm going to put towards the fence and cut my 1/4-inch strips. This is where the change happens. I'm going to put this over to 1/4 inch. Check the fence. Tape measure. Ah, there it is. You guessed it, I got to check that it's a 1/4 inch. Now that I've checked and it's a 1/4 inch, we're good to cut. Everything is the same, except you're going to probably wonder, how am I going to fit this push stick through the blade in the fence? It's just not going to work. So I'm actually going to have to cut through this push stick, because one of the rules with this saw is the board between the blade and the fence must pass through the blade. It can't stop, because if it stops, it's going to kick back on you. So this push stick is going to be tight against the fence, and it's going to ride the fence and push over top the blade, and you're going to have a little cut at the bottom of your push stick. Everything else is the same. I'm going to start, because I want a little more control, I'm going to start with my hand, like so, pushing with the palm of my hand, and then once I get to here, I'm going to press this tight against the fence and continue on all the way through. Okay? We're going to need to cut 2 of each sides. So I'll turn on the vents, I'll do my cuts, and you can observe. One thing I didn't do is make sure I pushed over that outfeed roller. So that's why I just stabilized it like this. So I'll go ahead and I'll fix that. So this is a good chance for me to actually show you how to set this up. You want to set it up with a straight edge, make sure it's parallel to the edge of the table saw. Now it should support my board, and then I put this on here, and I usually like to have it about 1 millimeter below, so it's just a little tiny bit lower than the fence, about 1 millimeter. See that? Perfect. Yeah, we're good there. So let's do that again. You can see I cut my 1/4 inch strip. That's going to go in between. That's going to look great. Let's do another one. Make sure you have the joint or the ripped edge towards the fence. Up and over. Now this board you're done with, but other people will need it, other students. This normally won't be here, so let's get rid of that. So that extra board can just hang out over here for the next person to use. And let's do that long one now. The edge towards the fence. Up and over. Let the blade stop, please. Okay, and again, that extra board over here. So you should have 2 short strips, 2 long strips of walnut, A1, A2, C1 and C2, and then your 5.5 inch B and your 5.5 inch D. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 pieces all together. We're going to take this to a work table, put them edge for edge, make sure everything fits nice and tight. And if it does, the next lesson is going to be how to laminate your boards using pipe clamps. So stay tuned.